It was 1:14 in the afternoon when she walked up to the reception desk. She placed a simple manila envelope on the cool marble. Inside, $50,000 in cash. She didn't leave a name. She didn't wait for a thank you. She just straightened the edges of the envelope, turned and walked back toward the service corridor. The smell of floor cleaner and the dust from behind the vents on the 8th floor still clung to her uniform. But she wasn't alone. Up on the mezzanine, a man had been watching her for the last 11 minutes. He'd seen her find the envelope. He'd seen her open it. He'd seen her hands freeze as she counted the cash. He'd seen her fold it closed and carry it downstairs like it weighed nothing at all. And tonight he was going to follow her. Lennox Ashford didn't go home. Instead of heading to his penthouse, he slipped into the back of the black sedan, idling on Montgomery Street. He gave his driver a simple 5-word command. Follow that woman. Keep your distance. The driver, who had worked for Lennox for 9 years, didn't ask which woman. He knew that tone. It was a tone that meant questions were not welcome. The sedan pulled silently from the curb. Lennox watched her through the windshield. She walked with a purpose, not fast, not slow. It was the pace of someone whose life was scheduled down to the minute, with no room for deviation. She crossed Market Street against the light, not out of recklessness, but because she knew the timing. She'd walked this route 1,000 times. He told himself this was just business. A person who returns $50,000 is either a saint or is putting on a hell of a performance, and both were worth understanding. See, Lennox had built a logistics empire from the ground up, all based on one simple principle. Every action has a motive, and every motive can be measured, can be quantified. An act of generosity this big with no explanation. It was a variable his system had no column for. It made him deeply uneasy. As they drove, the city began to change around them. The gleaming glass and steel towers of the financial district gave way to older facades of painted brick and iron fire escapes. The storefronts shifted too. A check-cashing place with 2 letters missing from its neon sign. A laundromat, still humming at midnight, spilling blue light onto the sidewalk. A liquor store with bars on its windows, a man sitting on a milk crate outside, not really waiting for anything. Lennox had driven through these streets hundreds of times. His company's main distribution hub was just 11 minutes south of here. He'd approved the route maps himself, but he'd never actually looked at what was between the highway off-ramp and his warehouse. It had never occurred to him that anything worth looking at existed in that space. She turned left on Eddy Street. The sedan hung back. The streetlights here were fewer and farther between. The ones that worked cast a sick yellow glow that made everything look temporary, as if the light itself wasn't planning on staying for long. She stopped in front of a 5-story apartment building on the corner of Eddy and Laguna. The brown stucco was stained with dark streaks running from the roofline. The security door at the front entrance was propped open with a folded piece of cardboard. She didn't go in, not right away. She stood on the sidewalk for what Lennox timed as 2 full minutes, and then Lennox witnessed something that stopped him cold. She set down the bag she was carrying. She reached up and retied her hair. She bent down, took off the worn-out shoes she'd been wearing all night, and put on a cleaner, softer-looking pair. She straightened her jacket, adjusted the collar, and wiped something from under her left eye with the back of her hand. Then she picked up her bag, rolled her shoulders back, and lifted her chin. She arranged her face into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close enough to pass for one if you weren't paying careful attention. Lennox was paying very careful attention. He'd watched people prepare for boardroom battles, for multi-million-dollar negotiations, for courtrooms that would decide their fates. He recognized the mechanics of it, the deliberate construction of a version of yourself that the people on the other side of the door needed to believe in. This woman was doing the exact same thing on a cracked sidewalk in the Tenderloin, just before walking into her own home. She didn't want whoever was inside to know how tired she was. She didn't want them to see what the night, what the world, had cost her. She was building a face for her children, the same way a CEO builds a face for their shareholders. And she was doing it under a flickering street light, next to a door held open by garbage. She went inside. A light blinked on in a window on the 3rd floor. It was a warm light, the kind from a lamp, not a harsh overhead fixture. The kind of light someone chooses because it matters what a room feels like. Lennox just sat in the back of his car. He didn't tell the driver to go. He didn't check his phone. He just stared up at that 3rd floor window. He finally pulled out his phone, but not to make a call. He opened a note and typed in the address, 741 Eddy Street, apartment 3C. He saved it. Then he put the phone away. "Take me home," he said softly. On the ride back, the city reversed itself. The iron fire escapes turned back into bay windows. The check-cashing places became wine bars. The dim yellow streetlights were replaced by bright, even ones, as if the city itself had decided some neighborhoods deserved to be seen more clearly than others. Lennox didn't notice. He was thinking about those 2 minutes on the sidewalk, about the kind of exhaustion that requires that much preparation to hide, about the vast, immeasurable distance between the marble reception desk where she'd left the money and the piece of cardboard wedged in her front door. He had her address. He just didn't know what he was going to do with it yet. Her name was Denise Carter. Her day had started, as it always did, at 5:40 a.m. No alarm needed. Her body was the only clock she could afford. Her cleaning shift ended at 6 p.m., and if she was lucky, she was home by 6:25. She'd sleep from 6:30 p.m. until 5:40 a.m. the next day, unless the kids woke her up. They almost always woke her up. She hadn't slept more than 5 hours straight in 3 years. When she came out of her bedroom that morning, her 9-year-old daughter, Zuri, was already at the kitchen table. Her homework spread out. A bowl of cereal she'd poured herself sitting in front of her. The milk was on the counter. She was too short to put it back on the right shelf and didn't want to wake her mom by dragging a chair across the floor. Denise looked at her daughter, who was organizing her own morning like a woman 3 times her age because the alternative was asking for help from a mother who had none left to give. She kissed the top of Zuri's head, put the milk away, and started on breakfast for her son, Micah. Micah was 5. He was on the floor, drawing. He was always drawing. Not just because he loved it, but because drawing was the language his mouth hadn't figured out how to speak yet. The pediatrician called it a developmental speech delay. For Denise, those words were a stone she carried in her chest, one she could neither swallow nor put down. Speech therapy. That's what he needed. Everyone knew it. The school district evaluation team knew it. Private therapy in San Francisco cost $150 to $250 a session. He needed 2 sessions a week. Denise made $17.85 an hour. Her insurance covered 12 sessions a year. Micah needed about 100. The public program through Medicaid. A wait list. She'd been on it for 11 months. Nobody had called. So she made her own version. Every Sunday, she took the bus to the public library and checked out picture books. She made flashcards. She taped a list to the refrigerator. Speech words of the week. Every night before her shift, she'd sit with Micah, point to the words, say them slowly, and wait. When he couldn't say what he wanted, he drew it. A sun when he was happy, rain when he was sad, a drawing of Zuri when he wanted to play, and a drawing of the moon when he wanted his mom to read to him, because their favorite book had a moon on the cover, and the moon had become the word he couldn't say, but could show her. That morning, Micah held up a drawing, a yellow crayon circle pressed hard into the paper. The moon. Read to me tonight, Mom. She took it and put it on the refrigerator with the others. turning her face away so he wouldn't see her expression. She made breakfast. She packed Zuri's lunch. She checked the bus schedule. And for 4 precious minutes, while the kids were occupied, she sat at the table, pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, and just breathed. Not to stop from crying, but because the weight behind her eyes was a physical thing, and pressure was the only thing that eased it. Then she stood up and started the day. She didn't know that tonight she would find an envelope in a trash can on the 8th floor of the building where she worked. She didn't know it would contain $50,000. The executive lounge was the last stop on her route. She cleaned it every Thursday between 10:30 and 11 p.m. Leather chairs, a coffee machine that cost more than her rent, and a brushed steel trash can that weighed more than mica. It usually held espresso pods and napkins. But tonight was different. Tonight, nestled among the trash, was a manila envelope. It was heavy. Her hands, almost on their own, opened the flap, and then she stopped breathing. Cash, stacks of $100 bills. She counted it. $50,000. That number wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. It was speech therapy for Micah, sessions with the best specialists. It was rent paid for a year. It was shoes for Zuri that actually fit. Shoes Zuri never complained about because she knew better than to mention things like that. It was the $40 she sent to her brother in prison every month. Money she saved by skipping lunch 3 days a week. It was the end of skipping lunch. She placed the envelope on the conference table and stepped back, just looking at it. The way you look at something that could change your entire world if you let it. She picked it up, folded it, and put it in the inside pocket of her coat. She finished her work. She mopped the lobby. 45 minutes passed. Then she walked to the reception desk, took the envelope out of her coat, and placed it on the marble. She tore a scrap of paper from a notepad and wrote 7 words. Found in executive lounge, Thursday night shift. She didn't sign it. She didn't wait. She walked back to the service corridor and clocked out. Her hands were steady. Her coat felt lighter. She didn't know the money was a test. Well, she didn't know that a test had been set. Lennox had placed 3 envelopes with $10,000 each in different parts of the building. 2 had vanished without a trace. The third, he thought, was this one, now sitting on the reception desk with a 7-word note. The woman who put it there was already on a bus heading west, wondering if Micah would still be awake when she got home. To understand why Lennox was running these tests, you have to understand him. He started with 1 beat-up truck. By 30, he had a fleet. By 40, an empire. He built it all on ruthless optimization, every variable accounted for. But the person who truly shaped him was his wife, Opal. She had been a nurse. She was the one who taught him to see the people who were invisible to everyone else. The janitors, the drivers, the cashiers. She simply existed beside him in a way that made invisibility impossible. When she died of cancer 6 years ago, that part of him died with her. His world became numbers and systems again. Then a so-called charity scammed him out of $12 million. The experience left him with a bitter, settled conviction. Everyone performs goodness when they think someone is watching. The only real measure of a person is what they do when they believe no one is. So he started his test. 3 envelopes, $10,000 each. 2 disappeared. He wasn't surprised. But the third one came back. His wife, Opal, had left him a letter. He read it every morning. One line had always haunted him. You will know them by what they do with what they cannot afford to lose. For the first time in years, sitting in his office, he felt a flicker of wanting to understand what she meant. 3 days later, he sent a secure message to HR. Who was on the night cleaning rotation for the 8th floor executive lounge last Thursday? The reply came in 14 minutes. Denise Carter, employee ID 4471. He pulled her summary file. Single, 2 children, 1 with a documented speech delay. On a Medicaid wait list for 11 months. lived in a Section 8 apartment on Eddy Street, earned $17.85 an hour, no sick days taken in 3 years. At the bottom of her last performance review, her supervisor had written, "Reliable, never late, never complains, never asks for anything." Lennox read that last line twice, "never asks for anything." That didn't describe someone with no needs. It described someone who had learned that showing your needs was a luxury she couldn't afford. He called his personal assistant. "I need discreet background on an employee. Her name is Denise Carter." The next evening, Lennox was parked across the street from her building. He saw her get off the bus, carrying groceries and a library bag. Her daughter, Zuri, came out and took the heavy grocery bag without being asked. Then her son, Micah, appeared at the glass door, holding up a drawing. Denise smiled, a small, tired, careful smile that cost her something to produce, and took the paper from his hands like it was a precious artifact. Through the third-floor window, Lennox watched. He saw Denise at the kitchen table, a library book open. He saw Micah climb onto the chair next to her. He saw Zuri doing homework nearby. He watched Denise point to the words, her mouth forming them with deliberate care for her son. On the refrigerator behind them, he could see a row of small drawings, the boy's art, taped up neatly, each one given a place of honor. She was teaching him herself, with library books and tape. She was doing the work because the system had failed her, and she had decided that not having money didn't mean not doing the work. Then he saw it. The boy looked at his mom, opened his mouth, and a sound came out. He tried again. The shape was closer. Moo, quiet, imperfect, but it was there. A word. Denise didn't clap or cheer. She just turned the page to a picture of the moon and kept reading, as if this miracle was the most normal thing in the world. Lennox sat in his dark, silent car. He hadn't sat this still, this completely captivated by another human being, since the last night of Opal's life. Denise Carter was born in a part of San Francisco that people in Lennox's world drove through. Not to. Her father was a plumber who taught her one simple rule, a rule he repeated over and over until it became part of her DNA. He said it the day she found a $20 bill on the floor of the grocery store when she was 8. He walked her to the service desk, looked her in the eye and said, "If it's not yours, it's not yours. Doesn't matter how much you need it. Doesn't matter if nobody's looking." Her hands gave it back. That rule, that core of her being, was forged in loss. Her father died when she was 19, her mother 2 years later. Her brother, Terrell, lost his way and ended up in prison. Denise was left to raise 2 children on her own, on a salary that was a constant, brutal math problem. She didn't ask for help. Asking was a transaction that cost more than it returned. It meant paperwork, judgment, surveillance. So she didn't ask. She just carried it all. On a Saturday morning, Lennox Ashford knocked on the door of apartment 3C. He didn't send an assistant. He came himself. Denise opened the door, her face a mask of wary caution. "My name is Lennox Ashford," he said. "I own the building where you work. You returned an envelope last Thursday." He paused. It contained $50,000. She just looked at him, her eyes giving nothing away. "I know," he said, reading her silence. "That's why I'm here." She opened the door the rest of the way. Inside, the apartment was small but immaculate. He sat at her kitchen table and laid it out. Not as a gift, but as a business proposition. A position in his company. Operations coordinator. A salary 3 times what she was making. A benefits package with a rider that covered unlimited speech therapy for dependents. No wait list. The position required a GED and a certificate, which the company would pay for. "This isn't a gift," he said, seeing the pride and suspicion in her eyes. "It's an investment. There's a difference." She looked from him to her son, who was on the floor, his yellow crayon moving furiously, drawing another moon. I need to think about it," she said. He nodded and left. He didn't press. He knew this wasn't about the money. It was about trust. It was about a woman who had learned that every outstretched hand eventually pulls back or asks for something in return. That night, Denise sat at her table, doing the math. The job was daytime, the classes were at night, childcare, the numbers didn't work. They were close, but almost doesn't pay the rent. The next morning, she found a note taped to the refrigerator, in Zuri's 9-year-old scrawl. I can watch Micah, I already do. That afternoon, there was a knock on the door. It was Loretta, her neighbor from across the hall, a retired postal worker. I heard you doing math out loud last night through the wall, she said, no nonsense in her voice. I've been watching you carry this by yourself for 3 years. It's enough. You bring those babies to my door when you leave. I'll be there. And don't you dare offer me money. I'm asking you to let somebody help you before you break. Denise looked at Loretta. In communities like hers all across the country, this was the real system. Not the one with case files and wait lists. The other one. The one built on proximity and observation. The one that understands the woman across the hall isn't a stranger. She's infrastructure. Denise closed the door. She looked at Zuri's note. She looked at Loretta's empty doorway. She looked at the drawings on her fridge. And she understood. The nothing she thought she had was never nothing. It was her daughter making her own cereal. It was her neighbor bringing over Thanksgiving dinner. It was her son drawing her the moon. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized on her first day of work. The number for the owner of the company. "This is Denise Carter," she said, when he answered. "I'll take the position." The first year was a blur of 15-hour days, of learning Excel from library books, of sitting in meetings in conference rooms she used to mop. In March, Micah started speech therapy. In April, Denise found a major routing error in the company's logistics that had been costing them millions. A mistake no analyst had ever caught, but one she'd noticed from 3 years of watching idle trucks on the warehouse floor. She presented her solution to a room full of executives. Lennox was in the back, watching. In May, Micah said his first full sentence. Then, 8 months after she found the envelope, the call came. It was from Lennox's accounting department. There was a discrepancy. The envelope she returned had $50,000, but the envelope Lennox had placed as a test only had $10,000. They traced it. The $50,000 was a cash withdrawal from a personal fund belonging to Kendrick Ashford, Lennox's son. He'd left it in the lounge after a meeting. He forgot it. He forgot $50,000 because it was a number his life didn't notice the absence of. The truth hit Lennox like a physical blow. The envelope Denise found wasn't his cynical test. It was real money, left by a man who didn't miss it, found by a woman who needed it more than air, and returned by hands that were shaking. Not from indecision, but from the sheer weight of the integrity of that choice. She hadn't passed a test. She had made a decision in the middle of her actual, messy, difficult life. She did it not because someone was watching, but because she believed no one was. Lennox looked at the letter from his wife, Opal. You will know them by what they do with what they cannot afford to lose. For 6 years it had been a ghost. Now it was flesh and blood. He called his son. Your money was returned. The envelope you left. It was returned by the woman who cleans the floor you walk on. She earns in a month what you left on a table and forgot. Think about that. Kendrick came to his father's office that night. He was a product of a world where janitors are invisible. What's her name? He finally asked. Denise Carter. Kendrick typed the name into his phone. It was a small act, but it was a beginning. It was the first time he had ever written down the name of someone his life had been built on top of. A year later, Denise moved into a new apartment. The rent was paid from a salary she had earned. Zuri had her own room for the first time in her life. Micah, now 6, could say, Mom, I drew you the moon, on the new, clean refrigerator, Denise taped up the things she'd carried with her. The 7-word note she'd written, Zuri's note, and the new drawing of the moon Micah had just given her. She stood in her new kitchen in the warm afternoon light, in a life she had built, not just with her own 2 hands, but with the hands of the community that had refused to let her fall. She stood in that life and let it hold her. That night, Lennox sat in his empty office. He took out Opal's letter, and for the first time in 7 years, he wrote something back. Below her words, he wrote, I found her. She was cleaning the floor I walked on, and I almost didn't look down. He walked out of his office and took the stairs. 30 flights down, he walked past his waiting car and just started walking through the city streets. He had driven them 1,000 times, but tonight, for the first time, he was seeing them. The cruelest thing about this world isn't what people like Denise Carter have to survive. It's how easily the rest of us learn to look right past them. Someone in your building cleans the floor you walk on. Someone in your office empties the trash before you arrive. Someone in your life is holding it all together with nothing but discipline and love, and you've never once learned their name. If this story makes you think of someone you've been looking past, maybe it's time to look down. Not in pity, but in recognition. Because the most important things in this world are often the things we can't afford to lose, held in the hands of people we haven't even bothered to see. Great. Wow. What a journey that was. I'm sitting here just trying to process everything. I'm so curious to know 2 things. First, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And second, how did this story make you feel? Did any part of it really hit home for you? On a more personal note, I just want to send so much love and peace out to you and your family. I genuinely hope you're all safe and doing well, wherever you are. And hey, if you have an incredible, unbelievable, or just heartwarming true story of your own that you think the world needs to hear, please share it with us in the comments below. I read as many as I can, and I truly believe everyone has a story worth telling. As always, if you connected with this video, a simple like and hitting that subscribe button would mean the world. It helps our little community grow, and make sure you won't miss the next one. Thank you for being here. Take care.